Hello, friends and fellow gamers, I am That Zero, and we are back to chat on some more Last Cloudia. On today's menu, we are doing a deep dive of Gen the Mentalist. He is a sorcerer that was introduced with the Dr. Stone rerun collab, and I gotta tell ya, he is one of my favorite units in the game as of late. I maybe even like him more than Maiden Theria, but I don't know. I don't know. She is an absolute boss and house of a unit, but this guy, he fills some unique roles. He is a little bit tricky to get quite right. There's a lot of ways you can build him. There's a lot of wrong ways that you can build him. So the way I think we're going to do this is I'm going to walk through what the character offers at base, and I'm going to identify my mindset as I see some of this information and how I'd assess a unit, and come up with what things are going to be best leveraged, what the train of mind is as I find out more and more about an actual unit. This is not an initial impressions video by any stretch, but I still think that it's important to see how someone might interpret data and then adapt that interpretation as you learn more. So we're going to do that. And then I'm going to go through some of my personal findings in doing some testing of Gen and how that sort of affects things differently. And then we're going to get into some PvE builds, some PvP builds, and then hopefully tie this all up with a nice bow. Is he a good unit? Is he a bad unit? Now, before I get into it too deep, I will say I'm not somebody that's going to get super duper deep into the nitty gritty details. I'm not doing data mine stuff. I'm not going to have exact to the decimal point seconds on exactly how quickly a skill charges or the multipliers exactly on certain damage, and I'm not going to talk very specifically about stats. I want to talk about the broad overview of what these things do, just so that we can have enough knowledge to know how to treat these characters. If you want some more nitty-gritty details, there's a YouTuber I saw a few times, ZX Gaming, I don't know. I'm going to put his link down in the description below. I've only seen a few of his breakdowns, but he seems to get, it's really long form, much like these, but he gets really into the technical details of what they do, and he seems to break down the numbers really well. And I also saw that your boy Buddha, over Buddhafish on YouTube, he recently put up a Gen video as well. So I haven't seen videos from either of these guys because I want my own impressions up on my video, so I'll probably go check those guys out after I'm done here, see what kind of stuff that I missed, but definitely go show them some love. If you're subscribed to me, odds are you're probably already subscribed to Buddha. Hopefully you're subscribed to this other guy as well. He seems like he makes some really great content, so go show them some love as well. Without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this overview and see what kind of information we can glean at initial pass of what his stats, his illness resists, and his abilities and traits actually happen to be. Initial looks like stat-wise very similar to most sorcerers that we see. So decent HP with minimal strength and defense. So strength and defense still not bad. They're still at least over 800, but they're not super duper high. And usually, judging by past knowledge, most sorcerers tend to scale their skills and auto attacks off of their strength followed by a percentage of int. Making that assumption here again, we could assume that perhaps Gen is not meant to be an attacker, much like many other sorcerers out there. Like God Lily is not going to be attacking much unless you're just wanting to do some crowd control, get in some extra damage, maybe try to catch a kill with Post for Honor and just hope that it's enough damage, but she's not going to be doing a ton. It's just not the way that they scale. So it makes sense with his stats here as well, which is really low strength, which means it's going to be hard to buff it, so it's going to be hard to raise those autos, but int and mind is high, so he can shrug off magic attacks. Flavor-wise, it makes sense that he's strong of mind, being a mentalist, playing mind games with his opponents, so that's really cool. Intelligence as well plays into that also. So if you wanted to make him a mage, you could probably be semi-competent since he has a high enough int stat. So if you're lacking in a mage, you could easily teach him something like 3,700 years later, and then he can probably do okay as a mage. And mind-wise, he can also do decently as healing, I'm sure. We'd have to get into the rest of the kit to see where everything else goes, but this is kind of what I'm seeing based on previous information. Taking a look at status and attribute and ailment resist, he just has a resistance to dark. So Nothing really huge there. It's more so a flavor win from the anime, where again actually goes against Tsukasa, who happens to be dark, an embodiment of evil, and in the game he is also a dark type, so he can resist him. Ailment resistances. He's very stacked. He's weak to poison, but as anybody knows, poison is like the weakest of all of the ailments, at least in my opinion. I believe it does a percentage of your max health per tick. And I've never seen anybody care about getting poison on your unit. It's just not that big of a factor. So there might be some select cases where bosses might want to be poisoned because they're so tanky, and so that chip damage is actually worthwhile. But for you, you don't really care, so that's pretty solid. If you're going to take a weak in anything, poison is where you want it to be. Blind gives you a chance to miss your attacks, and yeah, so the fact that he comes resistant to it is quite nice. There's not a ton of ways that people are applying blind frequently, at least not in Arena, for instance, but it's still pretty good. Now, starting to look at these ailment resists, having things like blind, and then now we see cursed nil as well, we're starting to think that maybe he does want to be attacking a little bit more. So his strength doesn't imply wanting to attack, but his kit kind of says that he does want to be using skills more so than your average sorcerer, since he's nil to these things. He's also nil to casting, so that makes sense, being nil silence. Now, I will say this is a lot of value. First of all, anytime you can get some nils and resistances in places that you want them, it's massive, because they usually cost 4 or 5 to bump them in any direction if you choose to go the skill route to fix them. So the fact that he's able to cast and use skills without fear of losing that capability is really, really solid. And then he comes with resist stun. Everybody hates getting stun. There's no unit in the game that does well with stun and just, oh no, I perform just fine. No, everybody is bad from it. So the fact that you only need to manage one level to hit null in stun is very good for Arena, as well as very good in PvE for certain fights. Now, weak to illness. That could potentially be a problem. There's a big meta around healing with God Heals and Awaken and Proud Force. Like, you want to be able to sustain, and illness turns off that healing. So the fact that he's weak to it kind of sucks, and there's certain PvE engagements where you will get illness a lot. So you're going to need to make up for that. In our builds, we're either going to need to have an extra support character that can use cures in order to heal off status ailments such as that so that you can save them. You may want to stack up some actual resistances to illness for those specific fights. Probably not every fight because it can get expensive. I believe we need a total of 12 in order to make that be a illness nil, and it's not always going to be worth. But if you get into a fight where you find illness happening a lot and you don't have a good way to deal with it, it may be worth to teach him those skills for that particular fight. So moving on to his actual abilities. I put a spell on you. Long range combo attack inflicts curse. Now, I don't like the descriptions on skills because they're usually really simplistic, and until you actually get into play with them, it's really hard to know where they excel and kind of the nuances of them. I'm just going to continue to take first impressions, and then I'll give you my findings on these actual skills from personal testing. So, long range attack, chance to inflict curse. Okay, so he wants to stay on the back line as mages do. That's good. Having ranged attacks is always nice. We don't know if he has to move for this, or if, such as some of the skills that V uses, or if he's just going to be able to use them instantaneously, much like Dante when he throws his overdrive or uses a stinger ability. You could just use it from anywhere and it just works. Usually the latter is significantly better because you can just use things, just instant gratification is fantastic and what you're looking for. So Shallow Words, give all allies SCT recovery. So all of your skill cooldowns are reduced by 5 seconds after a fixed amount of time. So we'll go ahead and see what that actual duration looks like, but now we're seeing something kind of unique, which is a skill cost battery. There's only select ways to reduce cooldowns in this game. You can be running Spirit Breath on a healer, you could be running Glass Record, you could be running Honey Elixir. There's certain units such as Alice that have to bake into their kit. There isn't a ton of these things, and especially units dedicated to them. Usually you need to go out of your way to make these strategies work, and he's got it built in, so that's very, very interesting. Now, voice impersonation. Wide area instead of medium, so assuming that it hits much more units than the actual S1. Chance to give physical damage 20% to enemies. Okay, so that sounds really great. There are not many ways to just make people take more damage, at least specifically physical damage, and that means that this effect should stack with many other buffs. You could have somebody like Tink. Basically, she can give a physical damage buff. She could give a boost break buff. We can give a debuff with some of our other skills, making them take more physical damage. That would just stack on top of everything. So if this procs, it makes them weaker in that sense. Could be really, really big. Okay, cool. Black Nightshade. Apply Magic Circle that reduces each enemy's lowest resistance. Okay. And allies recover 50% after a fixed amount of time. Okay, so not only does he recover skill cost as a battery, his ultimate also is going to be regenerating MP for your team, which means if he's supporting and bringing up the skill usage of your units, that means they can more easily be fueled by things like Sharp Eyes, getting, per his ultimate, probably at least 5 to 10 more swings in with elevated damage from Sharp Eyes, so that's pretty nice. Okay. And then Magic Circle, that seems really, really niche. If you're in a particular fight where you're wanting to abuse weaknesses, maybe using Schlorg or Shift Lilibet or something along those lines, I could see it being something. But Gen is a neutral damage dealer, so he doesn't care about his own element resists. So this implies again to me that he is going to be more of a supporter, which comes in from having a higher mind as well, and then giving this cooldown to your team. So for anybody that doesn't know Magic Circle, there's one of these in every element, and basically when you apply it to an enemy, it gives a -10, I believe, to an associated element. So it's always the opposite of what things are. So if you give something a dark Magic Circle, it's going to reduce their light resistance because light is good against dark. If you give them a Ice Circle, it's going to make them weak to lightning because ice units are naturally weak to lightning. So that's generally how it works. This says whatever they're weakest to, minus. It would probably be more helpful if it was something along the lines of if it automatically applied the Magic Circle based on the elemental types in your party. Like say you're running 2 fire units, it would sense that you have maybe 2 neutral units and 2 fire units and say, okay, apply fire Magic Circle to everyone. So this is definitely really, really niche to very specific scenarios where you're wanting to be exploiting those resistances. And when he's neutral damage, and people usually standardize using Trishula on their elemental characters and try to not run multiple elemental characters because there's only one Trishula, it seems a little bit iffy, and I think the main value here is probably just off of the MP gain, but we'll see. Okay, on to his traits. We've got a whole lot of text here, and there's a lot of things going on. So, Mentalist. You nullify any Sorcerer, Killer, Slayer effects from enemies. This is definitely a bit of a flavor win, having null Sorcerer, Slayer on him. Tsukasa has Human Slayer, and I haven't tested because I'm not sure how I would do that, but I would assume that this would nullify the effects against him. And just like how he has Dark Resist, it's like he's able to thwart off attacks by Tsukasa. So it's sort of just directly contradicting this character. So from a flavor perspective, that's really cool. Physically attacking, chance to inflict physical damage plus 30%. So another way that we can make enemies just simply take more physical damage. So he pairs well with physical damage dealers especially, much like Tink. The original Tink, Diva Tink, she is made to have not only humans but physical damage dealers in her party. Not so much buffing for mages. So it seems like Gen is very similar in that sort of regard, so that's great. Frontal attacks automatically become attacks from behind. Huh. Okay, so I said before, based on his skill spread, it seems like maybe he doesn't want to be attacking. But now we've seen a few different things where physically attacking is going to be having a chance to apply some status ailments. He has Curse Nil, so he probably wants to be using those skills, and now he's going to be doing backstab damage, which means if he has something like Surprise Attack, Backstab, anything like that, he gets those for free, which means like those are some really good multipliers, so he might be doing some sizable damage, which is surprising for a sorcerer with the stats that he has, so we'll put a pin in that and come back to it. Silver Tongue. At start of battle and when near death, give all allies but this unit physical attack damage plus 25%. Again, very good with physical attack damage. And science magic plus 25%. Okay, so again, a little bit of a flavor win here. Even though he seems to bolster physical damage dealers a lot, I believe in the anime, he basically made an alliance with Senku and all of the people of science. So, from a flavor perspective, this is really cool. He's bolstering people that utilize the science magic as well as the actual physical damage dealers. So really good if you happen to get Gen alongside some of these other units. Maybe Senku he would run really well with. Chrome, if Chrome is maybe going to be a caster for farming. Just some basic synergy here, which is really good. And then in other pieces, they're more likely to be targeted by enemies. So you make them stronger and give them monster attractiveness. For anybody that doesn't know, anytime you see becomes more or less easily targeted, that's called monster attractiveness. And essentially after every attack animation happens, at least from what I have seen, it appears that an AI has a chance to retarget a new enemy based on monster attractiveness. So there's a little bit of RNG, like a dice roll, but it's weighted more heavily towards these monster attractiveness levels. So by default, everyone else is one level more attractive than Gen, meaning that while he's in the back line, while he's poking people, he is going to be hopefully getting ignored much more easily, which means he has some built-in survivability there, which is really fantastic. It also leads me to believe that if he is going to start doing some damage, which it seems to imply may be the case, but we'll see what the rest of the kit looks like, things like Megalon could be really, really good. He hides in the back, all of the enemies are swarming onto your physical damage dealers, and you're constantly going to be poking from long range to get an extra multiplier on top of backstab, on top of surprise attack. So lots of potential there. He's seeming like his physical capabilities are leaning to be a little bit more powerful than we initially anticipated. All right, now let's go ahead and get into his actual skill list. So first of all, onto his magic. Glass Record. So if you do not have the Light of Science arc, you do not have access to Glass Record strategies, which is allowing you to spam your skills on your entire team. If you have Gen, however, this unlocks this entire playstyle for you. That's massive. Using Glass Record is going to give you 10 seconds off all of your skill cooldowns, which is huge. If you throw Spirit Breath on everyone, this also heals you, which means in addition to the 10, you get an extra 3 seconds of cooldown as well. So 13 seconds every time you cast this. Now, there's a few things to know about Glass Record in general. One, even if you get instacast on it, it does have about a 1 second animation. So you can't just go cast, 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 cast. There will be about a 1 second delay between spamming this, even if you make 100% cast time on your unit, such as Gen. But something worth noting is it, much like many other magic that have animations, if you happen to get flinched after that animation starts, it still goes through. So there's just a timer from when it initiates to when it happens, where you will just go ahead and get that effect regardless. And we'll see this in some testing later, where I'm going to take us into the Reaper fight. I'm going to take him into the Reaper fight, and we're going to be applying some debuffs as well as using Glass Record, and on occasion we're going to get hit up with some fireballs. And when that happens, you'll see we'll get the Glass Record, we'll get knocked up, and then about a second later, the effect will actually happen. Just a good thing to note, having instacast make things a lot easier, and those effects will happen even if you get flinched, as long as you have initiated the animation. So, great. So it looks like he's got some of the Science debuff magic, which I believe only existed previously on the Sulfur arc, as well as on Senku, who has basically all of the support things. So, minus 25% to Strength and Int, and then also to Defense and Mind. So these are single target, which implies to me, in addition to his Alt and S2 being on a delay, these being single target tells me that long drawn-out boss fights is where he's going to get his most value. So when you're in it for the long haul, Gen's the boy to bring. So, okay, cool. So these are slightly better than the base buffs or debuffs where you're going to be running Blazer or Drain or whatever. Normally it's only 20%, so this is a slight bit more. Not a ton, it's not going to change the game completely, but it's very good. Extremely Bad Chemical. So this is an amped up version of Weak, which reduces all enemies' attribute resist by 25. This will bring them down by 35, so an extra 10%, which is quite good. This will also be extra good when you are trying for one of those very specific strats I was talking about, where you're targeting a weak point. So say an enemy has 75 resist across the board, but their weakest one is maybe lightning at a 25. So you can apply Bad Chemical to it, bringing them to a negative 10, and then his ultimate is going to apply Magic Circle, making it be a negative 20, and all of a sudden everybody who's actually hitting that damage cap, or that's actually hitting the proper weakness, is going to be doing 20% more damage. So that's pretty good. Again, situational, so I think really the bread and butter of what you'll be using is probably Super Bad Chemical Fatigue to make things die easier, because we're going to be spamming abilities, hopefully, with Glass Record and his other passives, but we'll see what the rest has to show. So MP up max, yeah, that just saves us 6 points. We want to have lots of MP because we want to be spamming Glass Record, presumably. Okay, so he's got the crit package. For anybody who's maybe seen me talk on different ways to build units, whether it's in the Discord or Reddit, things like that. I've got a really love-hate relationship with the crit package, where if a unit doesn't come with much crit compensated for, I do not think it's worth it to build it. You could eat easily 20 plus CS trying to make crit a thing just because it's a physical DPS and you need to be running crit. When I think those points can be better spent, say, with 2 weapon high boosts, for instance. Maybe you can get Meglion. Maybe you get, neutral damage raised 2 or something. I think elevating your non-crit damage is better than raising your crit damage, unless it comes in the kit, which it does here, which makes me so happy. So clearly, he is meant to be doing more than just negligible damage, for sure. So crit 2 and 3 are the biggest ones that you usually are looking for. Proud Force helps with sustain, so it could be one of two things. He's meant to be doing just barely enough damage to stealth sustain, or maybe he's intended to be getting Goddess Kiss so that he can get MP back so that his glass record spam can be a little bit more frequent. Or maybe he's just simply meant to do a lot of damage. We haven't seen a damage cap increase, but we haven't gotten through the rest of the kit, so we'll find out if he's meant to be a actual damage dealer or not. Okay, so we have some survivability here. Fake blood pack guard, chance to reduce received damage to 0, and then also illusion, chance to evade physical attacks. So he's not only going to be on the back line, giving monster attractiveness to your buddies up on the front line, but you're also just, if you happen to take some damage, you just have a chance to not. Okay, great. So he has some built-in survivability, which is good considering how pitiful his defense is. So that's great. I like that a lot. Auto barrier, auto haste. So he can shrug off magic a bit easier. So that's a minus 20% to the magic damage you take. That's pretty nice. Auto haste, so you gain 25% increase to all of your cooldowns for your skills. So again, emphasizing he does want to be using his skills. So not only as a battery, but offensively, maybe to apply some status ailments and debuffs overall. So that's good. And the fact that these are auto instead of something like fast just further emphasizes that these long drawn-out boss fights are really where he's going to excel over other units. He's in it when you need to be in the fight for a long time. No attribute attack raise 2. Yeah, this guy's doing damage. Okay, so a really, really expensive skill to just improve all of his damage overall. So a plus 30% to everything is great. And then we also get the neutral attack crit raise. So more critical chance, which is great, and then a plus 50 cap. Glorious. So he should be critting quite a bit, and he should probably be hitting his damage cap as well pretty easily, which means we don't have to throw things like aim vitals on or advanced aim vitals. He should have enough with this plus 50% to be good. Goddess Kiss. Okay. I guess initial assumptions were pretty correct in that he wants to be doing enough damage that Goddess Kiss is really, really well leveraged. So his auto attacks and other attacks are going to be getting backstab damage, which we can see right below here. Surprise attack, backstab, and reverse cross all included in his kit. So this guy has tons of multipliers going on, and it seems pretty obvious he needs to be attacking. If he's not attacking, you're missing out on like 50% of his kit at this point. So he can spam support magic, such as Glass Record and debuffs, and then use Goddess Kiss with all of these multipliers to hopefully pretty quickly get his MP back. We'll see how reliable that is. Close high boost. So this doesn't mean a ton, but I guess if you want him to be single-wielded, which most mages and supports are, he does get some bonuses. So physical attack damage bonus. Yeah, that actually applies to him pretty well. Usually this shows up on supports, at which case you get the defense and mind increase, which is good, but they don't care about physical attack. In this case, he gets a bit beefier, and his physical attacks get stronger. So, okay, this makes a lot of sense on again, actually. So maybe there's something we could do where we want to be, maybe he could be one of the first units that could use the two-handed skills really well. Two-handed hammer, two-handed spear. It gives you more crit rate to emphasize his crit damage. It gives him a damage cap increase, which so far we have not seen. He has the normal just 10k crit cap, so it could elevate that even further. So even if we are foregoing some potential damage with something like dual wield, we could potentially be leveraging his other strengths to make it more likely to hit these crits, and then maybe get larger chunks out of Goddess Kiss, and maybe even include some damage mitigation with things like Spear Boost and Spear High Boost, so that since his defense isn't very good, we could just have ways of flat out reducing damage and then buffing up his health pool to keep him alive longer. So something to think about. Quick trigger. For long drawn out fights, this doesn't matter nearly as much. This to me feels like it's here for PvP. This normally costs you 6 and you want all the skill charges, you want quick trigger. So the fact that it comes here for arena specifically is really, really huge. He could potentially start a fight with his shallow words in order to get that battery engine started early, which that battery effect could then fuel into another shallow word, so that's really cool. Decoy for both PvE and arena. I mean, this saves you 7 points. You usually just want it. It can save you from a one-shot mechanic that a boss has, allow you to god heal back up. In arena, it allows you to again use god heal as well, where if somebody takes you out, you get your respawn after a few seconds, heal back up, they have to keep fighting that mountain in order to get you out. Okay, that sounds pretty great. Drink of cola. Occasionally recover HP and MP. Okay, so this is interesting and this makes a lot of sense. So flavor-wise, I'm not going to get into why this actually matters in the anime. People that watch it actually know what it is. But the thing that I find interesting is this is more or less regenerate and magic circle on him. Now, I don't know how effective it is, if it's a fixed amount or percentage base. We'll find that out when we actually do some of our testing, but he doesn't come with Magic Circle, which I think he's the first sorcerer I've seen to not come with either Magic Circle or Advanced Magic Circle. So this is going to be a persistent effect that should hopefully be equivalent to one of those. So that means that if it doesn't properly count as a Magic Circle effect, and it's his own unique thing, then that means it stacks with something like Fast Magic Circle that we could get from Cloudia the Great, so then maybe he could get some extra MP in Arena, for instance, which could lead towards him being our caster. That could be a thing, because it's always a race to see who gets to cast first, so he could be good at that. But we'll just see how effective that is, and that could help us to determine how we want to build him. Whether HP is percentage based, MP is percentage based, all that can affect things. So, false report. When an ally becomes incapacitated, inflicts strength and mind minus 35% to the boss monster. So again, boss monster support, really great. So this partially makes sense to me. I don't understand the mind. Bosses aren't usually doing much for healing, so mind doesn't matter much there. I guess it makes it so that your magic units do more damage. I feel like this is more of a flavor win, probably tied into something from the anime, of science users just getting a leg up on people. So I think it's more of a flavor win having the minus mind in there, but the minus strength makes a lot of sense. So the boss could be super offensive, take out one of your units, you're trying to get them revived, get them healed up, and all the while the boss is dealing less damage overall. So it's a good skill. You're not going to specifically notice it, but it will be doing its job in the background, which is great. Weapon training. Battle start inflict strength minus 20% and crit rate minus 20% on all enemies. That's not a chance. That just happens. That's disgusting, to say the least. So, yeah, it's battle start, which means it should only last 40 seconds, because that's usually buffs and debuffs unless you have something extra giving you effects. So, in a boss fight, this doesn't do a ton. This feels more so like an arena thing to me. So if you're in Tower of Trials, maybe there's bosses where they have some one-shot mechanics, and this will help you to potentially survive them by just instantaneously dropping their stats down. My guess would be that this minus 20% strength probably doesn't stack with the bad medicine that reduces strength. So if you apply that, that strength is probably going to supersede this. I doubt it's a unique buff, but the minus 20% crit rate, we don't usually see that happening. I think Shift Lilibet has some magic that does it. I think it's called Shaker or something. This is really disgusting. In Arena, this just further emphasizes how much of a monster he is in Arena. Like, again, this is not flashy. You're not going to notice it very specifically, except that you're just not going to die as much. Like, if you're nerfing their ability to hit crits, that takes out a large portion of spike damage that people can have to take you out and not allow you to God heal. So that makes it much easier for things like Awaken to trigger to heal you up in Arena, and for God heals to have an extra half a second to be able to trigger and keep you up and make them, again, keep fighting that mountain in Arena. So that's really, really good. Continuing with this supporty debuff trend, while physically attacking. Chance to flip enemy strength in defense and mind buffs to defense. Okay, so in Arena, since we were just talking about that, that means anybody running fast skills, if you get lucky and this happens to proc, who knows, it could be a 1% chance, it could be on every single hit, it could be at the end of an attack animation. I don't know exactly how often this triggers, but the fact that you can say, hey, take their defense, and instead of being up by 20%, we're going to minus 20%. We're going to take your strength, yeah, we're going to nerf that. So there's a lot of ways that this helps you to kill your opponents and also stay alive, and in Arena especially, this seems really, really gross. But also, maybe you've noticed, but there's some boss fights where you'll get to a certain point, and they will all of a sudden just stop taking as much damage. Usually it's because you hit some sort of a health threshold where they gained a mechanic where they gained like plus maybe 65% to all of their stats or something. Well, you get sleight of hand to trigger, and all of a sudden they're nerfed really hard. So that sounds gross, and that sounds really great. So he's going to be physically attacking a lot, it seems, because he's got glass record making, reducing skill costs on your allies, but it also affects him as well. So he's going to be spamming attacks a lot, so attacking is going to be a key portion of his combat loop, it seems. So they've got so many damage multipliers. This guy wants to be attacking. It's very, very clear. We'll see what that actually looks like and manifests as when we get into the testing, but overall, this looks really, really fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of testing, and I'm going to come back with some of my findings. Okay, so we've made some really interesting observations about how some of the skills work. So auto attacks do a minor stun that kind of slows people down when they're aggressing at you. And more interestingly, you can see we're getting 2 hits when we are at a distance. So it hits twice. But when enemies are close to you, you actually get 4 hits. So the reason for that is if you actually look at his body when the animation happens, he's got kind of flower petals that hit the enemy, but also flower petals around him. So you hit everybody around you. So you basically get a double hit count if there are people on you, or you can spread your damage out by sending it elsewhere and then onto you. So if you're wanting to get Goddess Kiss procs, you increase those chances by double if you happen to have enemies next to you as well. So that's very, very interesting. Now, the S1 seems to do a minor stun lock and then pushes back and hops up enemies as well. So you can see we're doing this here. It pushes them and pulls them back. So his skill 1 helps to keep enemies off of him. So in addition to enemies wanting to be on your allies, not you, you simply have capabilities to crowd control and just keep people forced back. And then the S3 looks like it is a probably 2 or 3 times as big of a radius, making it easier to hit enemies. It also has a bigger multiplier on it, not by a huge margin, but we'll go ahead and see that. And instead of the minor knockup, this appears to just persistently shift enemies away from the actual origin of the blast. So you can see it pushing even harder than the other. Shallow Words, you cast it, and after about a second animation, you gain a buff. That buff goes away after maybe 4 or 5 seconds, granting your team the buff. To anybody who's still alive. So that seems to be a relatively basic function, but that is how it is working. So it's also worth noting that these skills, especially voice impersonation, when it's used, it seems to go just in front of a unit. So if Gen is here and an enemy is here, and you target this unit, the center of the blast is going to be about here. So if you're trying to hit a group of enemies here, target back here so that it starts in the middle. Okay, just to make sure that you're hitting the most range, because it will be shifted slightly towards you, and then whichever direction that circle is from the enemy does not matter. You will always be shifted away from Gen. So if you have enemy here, you center it here, they will all be shifted away from Gen. If you have Gen in the middle with an enemy here and here, you target here, it will shift them away from Gen. So he's always pushing things away, which is really, really great to know. Okay, so another interesting observation that I've made is we saw already that our auto attacks were doing 2 hits, and then if things were close to us, it was dealing 4 hits. But there was a visual bug where if you were targeting an enemy away from you, it would say 2 hits, and you would still hit the person next to you, but it wouldn't count towards your hit count, which was interesting. So I went ahead and put on dual wield. Okay, so now we are getting 4 hits as we might expect, and let's go ahead and be right up on these enemies. So then, in theory, we should be getting 8 now. Which we are. If I target this enemy out here, I believe it will only read 4. Yeah, so see, now I'm only getting 4 hits. So I think this is just a visual bug more than anything, but I just find it very interesting that if you're targeting the enemy way out here and you're hitting people over here, these hits do not count towards hit count. Usually hit count doesn't really matter though, so it's not that big of a deal, but just observation that I thought was interesting. Also, the ultimate works very similar to Shallow Words as far as the MP regeneration. You put a buff on yourself and your allies, and then after 4 or 5 seconds, it goes away and you gain MP back. Pretty reasonably easy. Okay, so the final observation that I made, which is quite possibly the most important one for building Gen, is he seems to break the mold of how scaling works on sorcerers, at least unless my thorough amount of testing is not a solid indicator. So in the past, basically every single sorcerer pre-Sea Princess Leah, they all used int exclusively for their skills and auto attacks for scaling. And then after that, all sorcerers that have been added to the game, so Legarabos, God Lily, I think regular Lily, Amelia, Rimuru, all of these different units, they use strength as their base with a percentage of int. So I assumed that it would be the same with Gen, where he has low strength, so he probably doesn't have, he's very difficult to raise his base damage, but it's not the case at all. I tried making a strength build on him, and it's pitiful. It's really, really bad. So not only is it harder to raise strength in general because he has less stats, so obviously it helps getting int up, but you might think maybe it's like a 50-50 split. He gets half of it from int, half of it from strength. I think it's much more severe than that. I think that he gets his full effect from his int with a small percentage of strength, maybe 20-30%. The reason I came to this conclusion is I went in and did some damage tests, and one, I got my int up to roughly where it is now, which is about 1800, and I was able to very easily have my crits hit damage cap, okay? And then my non-crits were hitting around 4.5 to 5k, all right? And that was with my strength being down at about 850, maybe even 900. So then on my strength build, I got it up to 1800 as well, but the only way I was able to achieve that was by throwing on things like really powerful hammers with hammer high boost, which means I am also getting an extra 25% physical damage bonus. And my int was also quite a bit higher because its base is higher. So it was at about at least 1200 int. So cumulatively, I was closer to, about 3,000 total between strength and int, whereas the previous build, it was closer to about 2,400. So if it was 1-to-1, you would expect similar numbers. The strength one should actually outperform what that value should actually be. But instead what happened is my crits were barely able to hit 6k if I was lucky. My regular hits were doing closer to like 1.5 or 2k. Like I was struggling to hit 5k consistently. I would sometimes get up to that 6k mark, but most of the time it was 50. So it felt like strength literally didn't matter at all. It cares that much about int, so please don't build a strength build. Now, I do believe that strength has a percentage of it used, and the reason for that is I decided to go in and swap out one of my staffs for Science Flag. And Science Flag says when you're using your skills, it calculates 30% of your int towards your strength value. And when I did that, I ended up getting about 1 to 1.5k extra on my non-crits. I was still hitting crit cap, of course, but my neutral attacks were roughly 10 to 15% higher. So, without doing some crazy math to find out the exact numbers for you, assuming Science Flag works as we think it does, which is it literally applies strength value to your skills, then we could assume that if strength wasn't a factor, damage should not have changed, because I went from a staff with 200 int over to Science Flag, which also has 200 int, or it's maybe a 5 int difference, but it's not going to make in the thousands of difference unless the strength actually played a role. So a little bit of extra strength does work, but it is very, very heavy on the int for his scaling. So please don't try a janky strength build or something. My initial idea, as I said before, was to maybe try something like two-handed hammer, two-handed spear. Unfortunately, no. It's bad. It's really, really bad. There were people on Reddit that were like, hey man, why don't you just use dual wield? Just use dual wield, it'd be way better. Why even bother with these other things? It's just bad in PvE. Nobody wants the two-handed skills. Yeah, fair. I've tested it. And they were right. They were right. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Dual wield is excellent on Gain, and we will see that in some of the upcoming builds that I have for you. So another important piece that I observed is that Drink of Cola does appear to be percentage based, which means the higher your MP is and the higher your HP pool is, you will be getting more regeneration overall. Well, okay, I didn't do enough testing on the HP. That might be based off of your mind, actually, but the MP is what I really care about most, so I apologize. I'm not going to go back and do that testing because I suck and I'm lazy. What's up? So this first build is for those people who are reasonably fresh, and Gen is your only support option. So this build is not what I consider to be his best build, but it does accomplish something unique. So the people that came in for, say, the DMC collab, they got all the Arks, they got all the units. Well, all the units, they're physical DPS units, which Gen likes. Like, he really likes being with physical DPS. But say you never got a tank or a Lena to be a healer, or Emtheria because she hasn't been around since you've even been in the game. So an actual support unit you kind of need. Well, Gen can fill that support role pretty well. He does some debuffing to help keep your team alive, and he comes with mine, so he could be your healer if you need. So when you have Gen on your team and he is your only support, that is what this build is for. Again, I do not think that it is a perfect build for him, but I think that it fills the role better than my secondary build for you specific people that need to have a dedicated support. In this build, you'll see Int and Mind are both raised quite high. We also have his health reasonably high, which can get even further, but you'll see I put a lot of choice into this build. In fact, you'll see that I'm currently sitting at 78. Oh, wait. Okay, so now that I went ahead and actually put my appropriate build on, you'll see that my stats shifted on screen a little bit here. And this build, you'll see, has more mind over int, because we're not focused on dealing damage so much in here. And because we're not going to be dealing as much damage, we can't rely on Goddess Kiss quite as much. And that means that we need to focus on Drink of Cola quite a bit more. So we want his passive regen to be much, much higher. And we probably can't afford to be spamming skills quite as thoroughly, or spamming his magic quite as much, so we're not really going to be focused on abusing Glass Record in this particular build. This is going to be what I call the Swiss Army Gen, where he can do whatever you need him to do, and he can cast the right things at the right time so that you have the tools you need for your engagement. And I left a lot of the choice of what those tools are up to you by leaving a whole 20 points reserved so that you can put on any support magic and skills that you want. So you can see his mind is up closer to 1800, int is only at 1600, so he'll still be doing okay damage, but not super great. Let's go ahead and actually get over here into the build. So I've got HP plus 2 as well as HP up 4. That could be HP up max, I just haven't taught it to him yet. But that could be an option if you want some more. You can also just stack up some more HP as well. Like I said, his HP is better balanced than his defense, so if you're going to raise survivability, do it through HP, not through defense. MP up 2. Or 4. I think that I actually want the rest of these on, so we won't have quite as much flex. I think this is actually a bit better, so I apologize. I reset this up after recording this yesterday, and I'm redoing this, so bear with me. So I'm only going to go with the HP up plus 2. For anybody that doesn't know, if you have gotten access to this through beating Tower of Trials, for 95% of units, this is the best HP up skill in the game. So comparing directly to HP up 4, 15% is almost never going to give you 1,000 HP, unless you're on someone like DB Ray, whose base is just crazy high. So getting a flat 1,000 that then scales these up is extra good. So if you want to go on and throw some HP ups in addition to what we have here, you can spend some of these flex SC in order to make him tankier there. But we have all these MP ups because, again, we're focusing on passive MP regeneration rather than focused and active regeneration through Goddess Kiss. So we want our MP high. We're still running a Magic Up Max just because, bang for buck, I think that it's worth getting at least 1 in there so that he's doing a little bit more damage. It just helps to round him out a little bit better. We're also running Magic Defense up so that his heals can be a bit better, raising up that mind. He has a naturally high mind anyway, so buffing that up is not a bad crit up. We still want to be doing some crits because we want that if we are going to use Goddess Kiss, it should be doing something. We want to be doing a little bit of damage, and also just making it a little bit more reliable for our heals to crit as well, which we'll get into. Crit up is easily taken off if you don't want it. I don't think it's that big of a deal. He's got really good crit chance as it is, so I have it there, but you can flex that off pretty easily without worrying too much. Auto critical, very similar. For people that say they need to build crit on anything, if you're willing to get 8% crit rate by building 7 points for crit 3, you should always be willing to spend 9 points on auto critical to have crit up all the time. So unless you're somebody that's just nuking waves and you're just farming, then sure, fast critical. But auto critical is super duper fantastic. I mean, plus 15 to your crit rate for 2 more points than what critical 2 does. So almost double the effect for only 2 points. So please, auto critical, very worth. Otherwise, I wouldn't even run fast critical on him if you don't have access to auto critical. Simply because, like I said, he excels in long drawn-out fights, and this build is basically for those long drawn-out fights. So if you don't want something that's only going to last the first 40 seconds anyway, you'd be better off just teaching him the critical skill or critical phaser or something, whatever you have access to, so that him and the rest of your team can just be getting critical. That could go into the flex cost that I said we can have for determining what you want your support magic to be. Reject. We're going to further emphasize that he's a backline unit. He's going to be your support. He is going to not want heat on him at all. So you're going to want to move him to the back side of the map. You want your physical damage dealers up in front. So adding in reject means that AI is going to have less of a likelihood of targeting you. A movable object. I think this is also very optional. You could get rid of this. It is simply there so that if you want to throw in some glass records, it becomes more and more likely. But the fact that he's on the back line, he's rejecting enemies from even coming by him, you can probably get away with getting rid of a movable object, but it will make it more reliable to be able to get them, because we're not opting for cast speed with this particular build. Main reason for that is when it comes to support magic, not healing magic, but support magic, I found that using those spells has basically instant cast time. It'll usually have maybe a half to a 1 second animation, but as soon as that animation starts, even if you get flinched, it's just going to go and happen anyway on that set timer. So if Gen puts his hand out for casting his super bad chemical and then gets flinched instantly, as long as his hand made it to that cast point of the initial, you don't need to go through the rest of the animation. You will see the debuffs show up on the enemy. And that's very similar for the buff skills that you can throw on your allies if you use an elemental wall, if you use a phaser of some sort. Is as long as you start the animation for it, you're good to go. There isn't really a cast windup on it, unlike some certain magic skills. So it works like God Heal that way, but without time stop. So I don't think a movable object is that necessary, so depending on what skills you want to give him, test and see if it is worthwhile. You can, of course, throw in high-level magic chant, and you can also modify this build with some more cast speed so that you can make it easier to spam glass record, but I don't think the sustain is there for actually throwing out a ton of glass records. In this build, we're not focusing on dealing so much damage, so we don't need uptime on spamming skills, which means we have the freedom to go and just be casting the spells that we need to be supporting our team over and over. So we're slowly casting spells, we're slowly getting MP back naturally, and you'll notice when we actually run this that it's pretty reliable on the amount of MP that we keep having in reserve. Okay, so onto the equipment. This has me really excited. So for anybody that's been in the game for a long time, Godly Staff Apocalypse has always been kind of a meme. Like, it's a stat stick, so if it's the only staff you have and you just needed something for your unit to deal damage, it works. I mean, 200 int is very good int to throw on something, and then it's got some MP, which is really great. But overall, its effect is just bad. So it gives you a chance for your heals to do critical. So there's a problem for 2 reasons. One, I mentioned before my disdain for the crit package. Well, you spend a lot of points to get crit. You do not want to spend points getting a healer to be able to crit. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. Furthermore, your heals only hit once, which means you have to hit that crit with that one hit in order to make it happen. Further, dedicated healers usually come with things like heal boost, heal high boost, and if that's the case, odds are pretty high that with enough mind, their non-crits are just going to be healing you to max anyway. So it's total overkill. So you don't want to waste crit to try to make this janky-ass thing work. However, Gen is one of a kind. He has a crit package built into him already. As we've seen, we want to be able to abuse Goddess Kiss a bit. We want to be able to have him do a fair amount of damage. You want him to generally have good int, good mind. All of these things work for him. So I think he's truly the only unit in the game that actually loves the Apocalypse Staff, which makes me really happy because it's been collecting dust for a long time. So I think that is absolutely one of his better in slot, and especially for this build where we're focusing on supporting. If you want to do the most damage, Science Flag, if you have it, is easily best pick. I would wager the newest UR Ark from Shift Zex. I think that has probably 250 int on it. That's going to be fantastic as well, because the higher you can jack up int, the higher your neutral damage is going to end up being. So it's quite good. Again, going along with this idea of having passive regeneration, we're going with the robe Divine Law Kaltina Rune. Now, the reason this is significant, if you don't know, these robes, we have kind of two basic options for this sort of strategy. So there is Robe of Solfine, and this one says that you get HP and MP up. And effectively what this does is it gives you auto regeneration and auto magic circle. So I believe the regular magic circle gives you 1% of your max MP every X amount of interval. Maybe it's 6 seconds, maybe it's 20. I don't remember exactly. Don't hate me. Well, what Kaltia Rune does instead is it foregoes that regeneration effect, because we're already going to be healing ourselves and our team anyway, especially if we're casually throwing in some glass records here and there. But this gives us advanced magic circle auto, which is going to be 2% of our max. So the higher we can get our MP, the more that passive regeneration is going to be happening. So we now have two stacking sources of this. We have it from Drink of Cola, and we have it from our robe. So it just allows that sustain to be much, much more consistent. The thing that is also really nice about this build is, since this is for the newer player that probably doesn't have a ton of resources necessarily, and you're using this as your sole support, not everybody has the same tools. So you can find the closest robe that you have, the closest staff you have that has some MP on it and some mind and things like that. Accessories are even looser than that. So currently I have Crown of the Sun on to give a big boost in MP as well as HP, which is then going to scale off of those modifiers, as well as giving the stats that he likes most. So boosting that defensiveness as well as healing and some damage by getting int, mind, and defense. Okay, it's not a crazy thing, but it's still stats, and it works reasonably well. If you want to go a more supporty buff route, you could use the Phantom Mirror. That'll make all of your buffs last an extra 15% long. Also cool. I really like running Mark of the Existent, especially in very, very long fights. It gives you a little extra health, some more int in mind, again, to just help his damage as well as his healing. But then in places where you're going to be casting, like 50 plus spells because you're just constantly supporting or god healing or whatever, this just simply gives you a 10% chance to not use any MP. So if that triggers on a glass record, all of a sudden you didn't use the 60 MP that it costs for you to actually cast that spell, which is pretty great. So not only do we have passive regeneration, but we have passive cost reduction as well, to just all come together and just make it so that you almost always have mana to do stuff. And you're not able to cast things so quickly anyway that you're going to just chew through all of your reserves, so it should be able to help. But you can really put in whatever you would like here. A couple of other honorable mentions that could probably work. You can go with the cast speed package, so you could do Radstone and Cultist Pendant, so if you want to be more so on the glass record train, you could do that. I don't think this build is really made for it. The next one will be more so in line, but it is an option if you like that. Bell of the Skies, it's free reject as well, while also maxing out your stun nil, so it will give you another stun resist, boosting you up to nil, and give you an additional -1 to your monster attractiveness so that things stay off you even more. And that's a really, really free-to-play and new player-friendly one to get, so that's an option. There's also this Beast White Feather as well. Also another reject effect and a chance to auto-guard. So if you wanted to build maybe a pseudo-guard build in here to be able to gain extra MP whenever you're guarding and things like that, this gives you a shield effect while also rejecting to keep people away from you, so that if they get on you, you should be able to sustain even better. So this could be extra good in specific fights where maybe an enemy is just hitting the board all the time, and you being in the back doesn't really help you much, because they're not targeting you, they're just targeting literally everything. So that could be something you could flex in, and in general, just look through to see what you have, and there's a lot of decent options, and nothing's really that bad for accessory-wise on this particular build. Alright, so the thing with this build is we are emphasizing some of his strengths, and amongst his strengths, we have, he's competent at healing. He can do a fair amount of damage, but we're really losing out on that damage overall. He supports his team, and that's kind of it. He's got some survivability, so we're leaning into his survivability more. We're leaning into him supporting his team more, but we're really kind of shying away overall from his damage. So he's not going to be hitting nearly as hard as he could otherwise be, which he doesn't need to if he is going to be your only support, right? So as long as he's keeping your team alive, he's making it easier for your team to kill things, he's doing the job of a support, and you can have physical DPS or magic users in your team as well. So for those of you where that's the type of unit you need Gen to be right now, I think that this is probably a good way to serve him into your team. And then, like I said, we have those flex CS in a lot of those different areas where you can make it be whatever you want. Maybe you want to give him Graham Brave or the phaser skills or whatever. So okay, so now on to the build that I think is much better suited to emphasize Gen's strengths as a whole. Okay, so I've done a lot of testing, and I think that this build is where I think he shines the most. This is what I'd like to call the DPS battery Gen. Last one was Swiss Army Gen. This one is DPS battery. Reason being, not only does he himself do DPS, but he is a battery to help reduce skills for other people, gain some MP if needed for people, for sharp eyes. He's generating DPS. So he is our, actually, you know what? Generator works way better, just flavor-wise, from Stone. So you know what? This is going to be our DPS generator build. DPS GENerator. Oh my god, this just keeps getting better. Wow, okay, that worked out way better than I thought it would. So I'm leaving all this in, by the way. That was a weird train of thought. So, all right. So this build, this elevates our damage to be significantly better than the last build. So we're going to be able to be a secondary damage dealer really effectively. We are not going to have the passive regeneration. We are going to be actively gaining mana, but we're going to be doing it much quicker because we're going to be abusing a Goddess Kiss much more. We are going to be able to very easily hit his damage cap of 10k reliably with his crits, and then non-crits should be pretty competent, at least that's the goal. We also want him to be supporty, so we want Glass Record to be the thing. So we don't need as big of an MP pool because we don't want to be wasting on our skills. So we'll usually do 2 or 3 Glass Records in order to get his skills capped up, dump all of his damage, and then go back to using some autos to get some MP back, maybe use a couple more Glass Records so that we can keep spamming abilities and getting damage out while also healing. Now, this assumes that you probably have another support already. So the last build was if you have no support, Gen needs to do everything, which means damage isn't a thing he's going to be able to do super duper well. In this particular build, it assumes that you have Tink or Lena or Theria or something to be able to help keep your team alive, so he's not going to be your main healer. He will be healing because of Glass Record, but that's not going to save you in a pinch. So you need somebody that can do your god healing and heal status ailments and things like that. So this build assumes you have that in your kit, even if that's something like maybe your DPS units, each of them splashes for something. Maybe you have one DPS unit that has god heal, or maybe Gen gets god heal and you flex this build a little bit, or maybe you have a cure-all on another teammate and you choose to not have a support. Either way, he's not built to do everything. He's built to do the things he's good at and min-max those as good as possible. So, taking a look at the stats a bit more, MP is a little bit more modest, but still 400, pretty respectable. He's basically at base HP. He's looking to deal damage, which means Proud Force is going to keep him sustained even more thoroughly. And I think that in general he should be pretty good. Sometimes the best defense is just killing everything. So, Int is over 2,000 now. Mind is roughly the same, so about 1,400, a little bit less than our supporty build because we're not emphasizing the healing as much. We want to be dishing out damage. On to the actual skills and what we are running here. So, we are not adding any additional magic. He's got his default buff magic. He's got Glass Record. That's what we're going to be abusing most. I'm not opting for any more MP ups because, like I said, we don't need as big of a pool because we're only going to be spamming really quickly a couple of Glass Records. We want to maximize uptime of using skills, and if we want to maximize the amount of time that we're doing damage, we need things to be cast quickly. We don't want to be stuck in animations casting all the time, so we don't want to be just sitting here casting 10 Glass Records, which, yeah, helps our team, but then we're going to be capped on all of our skills, so we want to be able to cycle those in, and then cycle in some autos to get some MP back. So we want a perfect balance between DPS and support, and that's what we're going for here. As far as ways to get damage, I have tried a few different things, and I've landed on using natural magic ups as well as Auto Aura. So Auto Aura is going to only cost you 7, but it's going to give you that flat 20% on top of everything else, no matter what. That amount is going to be much higher than something like, you could say replace Magic Up 2 and Auto Aura with Holy Aura. And since you'll see in our equipment we're actually dual wielding staffs, that would give us a reasonable amount of extra int. But I think that trade-off doesn't actually translate very well, and stat-wise I found that I could usually get a few hundred extra int by running this way instead. I also tested things like phase change to see if that type of damage would be worthwhile, and I found that in general, getting rid of some of our other multiplying skills later in the build, phase change only helps your autos, which aren't that potent as they are. They're just kind of fine. So if you're going to be, in my initial testing, basically, if I could get Goddess Kiss to proc on a auto attack crit, when I was using phase change, I was gaining about 159, 160 MP back off of that proc. When I remove it and just go pure magic, just buff up my int, I was still getting 151 back when Goddess Kiss was proccing on a crit. So it is very negligible, the amount of benefit that I got. I did definitely a bit more damage with my autos, but you want to be spamming skills, not auto attacks, to be doing your damage. So I would rather be elevating all of my int so that all my skill non-crits are doing more damage overall, so that we can really push on the fact that we're getting lots and lots of hits in because of dual wield. Anything that's not critting is still doing sizable damage, okay? So this is where I've got things balanced up right now with Magic Up 2, 3, 4, and Max. Critical, I am opting for Critical Up 2. Like I said before, that 2% I think is really flexible. It's not going to do a ton. So that could go elsewhere if you would like. Perhaps this is where you could go in and you could use Recast, which maybe I'll even do. There could be a little bit of variation there. So Critical Up 2, not completely necessary, but I still like it. Like I said, Auto Aura, Auto Critical. He excels in long drawn-out fights, so if you want to use him where you're just going to be chewing through waves, just use this build anyway. You don't need to save points to make him a little bit better by using fast crit, fast aura, because, oh, hey, I'm killing my tower waves in 3 seconds anyway. You're going to kill them in 3 seconds anyway, so just you don't need to have multiple different builds set up, in my opinion, for that. If you're stomping things, you're stomping them, but have things set up for hard content so that when you go into easier content, it just works anyway, instead of bolstering your character extra supercharged for this one scenario that's already easy. Pose of Honor. So I'm opting for Pose of Honor, not Pose for Glory, because he's going to be getting kills, and you want to be able to have, like I said, max uptime of spamming skills. So Pose for Glory could fit here instead of our Critical Up 2, but because you're going to be spamming glass record to constantly be getting SC anyway, it only takes maybe 3 glass records to go from empty to topped up on his skills. So I think having Pose for Honor so that there's less time auto attacking to get Goddess Kiss to give you stuff back is going to be better for your overall uptime on dealing damage and using glass records. So Pose for Honor, good. You can of course flex it off and get rid of it if you're only in a boss fight, so if there's no small mobs. The example that I was doing a lot of my testing in was in the Reaper fight, and Pose for Honor is quite good in there just because Gen chews through the little phantoms that spawn in. Pose of Honor, I think, is really good if you want to put in Pose for Glory as well, also solid. But again, he is a secondary DPS. He's not your main damage dealer. He's meant to elevate a team. He feels like a support that still has really, really good damage. Megalon, between his Silver Tongue keeping people off of you, and then you could potentially flex on some extra gear, reject, things like that, so that monster attractiveness is up on your allies and keeping things off of you, you're going to be able to use this very, very well. For anybody that doesn't know, this gives you up to 50% bonus damage based on your distance from an enemy. So since you're on the back line, none of his skills or auto attacks require you to move in order to hit them. They can hit anywhere on the board. You don't have to line up shots or anything like that. So Megalon, super worth its cost. High-level magic chant. This is another one that could potentially be flexed depending on what you're wanting to do. In this build, we are wanting to maximize our cast speed, so I'm choosing to go with the minimum downtime approach of not using recast, but you could potentially swap this out for recast. This gives you a 20% cast speed. Recast will give you 30, which means it could lighten you up even more. It just means that every 40 seconds you're going to need to manually reapply recast to yourself. Another option is you could just say your other support that I said you have, they have 2 points of recast on them, and then you just need to remember that support needs to recast on your Gen to make sure he maintains his 100% cast uptime. Okay, so this 9 points could potentially go towards more damage. Maybe you like the idea of phase change. You could potentially put in phase change here and instead just be using recast on your Gen. So a little bit of flex there, which could help. I'm just going with the brain dead approach of this is always going to be a persistent effect. I don't have to do anything fancy. He just always works. Dual wield, very, very key to his damage potential. He does not have a damage cap increase, so having dual wield is going to supremely elevate his damage. So for anybody that doesn't know, dual wield in PvE is the gold standard for physical DPS, and the reason for that is that it doubles up all of your hit count. So when you normally have a damage cap of 10,000, dual wield says, hey, you can hit twice, but you're only going to be dealing 60% of the damage. Okay, well, mathematically, that means I'm still doing 120% damage. So there you get a flat 20% increase base. But if all your hits were hitting 9999 as they were, then splitting it up into multiple hits means now, even though you're weaker, if you can get your damage even higher, now instead of having a maximum of 999 damage, you have 9999 times 2. So if you're dealing 4 hits, that would be 4,000. But if you have dual wield, you're going to be dealing 8 hits, and now that's 8,000. It's literally doubling your damage if you have the right build. So dual wield is super duper essential for physical DPS. So if you have it, this is why people say get Sandworm early on, to make sure you have it in your kit. Less important if you have a unit that comes with dual wield, but for somebody like Gen, he doesn't, so he wants it. Sharp Eyes. Yeah, we are elevating damage, and he's so good at getting MP back that he is able to not only spam glass records, but also abuse Sharp Eyes. The reason, additionally, that I didn't add extra MP is Sharp Eyes goes off of a percentage. So we don't want to be leeching all of his MP away with Sharp Eyes. So if we elevate his MP pool larger, it's going to eat more MP per skill usage, and he's going to be spamming a lot of skills. So we want maximum uptime on our MP being elevated so that we can be using glass record a lot, and we can be using skills but not chewing through them. If you're finding that you are using way too much MP and you're not compensating for it enough with your Goddess Kiss, you could very easily just take this 9 points from Sharp Eyes, move it over to something like Phase Change, and then you could be getting a little bit better MP regeneration overall. So there's just a little bit of flex there. Reinforce is a very interesting skill. I've never found it to be super useful because usually mages, like most units, want to be using their special all the time, right? But in this particular case, especially in this build, we want to be just having lots and lots of damage on the neutral game for Gen, and his ult doesn't do any damage. The main draw is that it gains you MP, but we're gaining MP through other means with Goddess Kiss as it is, and probably much, much quicker than what this is going to give us. So what we can instead do is, because this charges so quickly, we can get our ult up and then just hold it the whole time. Yes, we can go ahead and we could use it to give an extra few abilities worth of Sharp Eyes to our physical damage dealers, or we could just have a flat 30% increase. When I was doing some of my different damage testing, I think it made my non-crits go from maybe 5 or 6k jumping up to closer to like 7 and 8k sometimes. So it just makes that neutral damage overall be much, much higher. So I think the 5-point cost of that coming in is very much well worth it. And like I said, I did a lot of testing between like swapping out this and maybe Magic 4 for 4 for something like Holy Weapon or Holy Aura and some other things to just test and see what kind of damage results we got. And I definitely found a Reinforced to be very much worth your while. That is the skills. And then over onto equips, again, I really, really like running Apocalypse Staff on this guy just because it helps with that extra healing. You might not need it if your support is always using your God Heals anyway, but for flavor's sake, I think that it works on him, and I like an excuse to use God Staff. You can very easily swap it out for anything, same with Science Flag. This build will work just fine if you don't have Science Flag. I do think it is his best in slot for damage specifically, but if you have pretty much anything that has over 160 int, you're probably doing pretty good. There's a lot of them that have over 200. Heaven's Cry, he's not going to get the benefit from crit damage, but just the raw stats are really, really good. You can use the Fireball Staff. He's not going to get anything for the extra fire damage, but it's got lots of MP, lots of mind and int on it. It's really, really good. Yeah, you can basically use whatever staffs you want. Just try to get your int as high as possible, and you want to be dual wielding. So great. Then we were running the Radstone and Cultist Pendant combo because we want to be at that magic 100% cast speed. So Radstone 20, Cultist Pendant 30, so we're at 50. High level magic chant gives us 20, and then our arc is going to be giving us an extra 30, which can also be flexible. Like I said before, there's a lot of ways to get cast speed between arcs and things like recast, so use your best judgment to see which you think is worthwhile. But this I found to be overall quite effective. The arc choices. I really enjoy Maiden's Lovely Banquet. I think that it is probably one of the best things, especially for this build. So he is built as though he's just going to be using Glass Record, but he has all this built-in stuff in his kit where he just does immense amounts of damage as well. So everything's working really synergistically. He has lots of uptime on dealing damage, and I think it just marries very well. Let's go through what this arc specifically does. So Healing Magic cast speed plus 30%. So that fills in that extra gap that we had, that 70%, and just makes us always have 100% cast time, which is fantastic, because without it, Glass Record takes probably a solid 5-6 seconds to cast. It's huge. Which also means it can be interrupted since we're not running a movable object. But if it's on instacast, if you're able to start that animation, you just get it. So you don't have to worry about spending points on a movable object, which is pretty fantastic. When buffed by support magic from another female unit, become more easily targeted and gain defense plus 25. This is the only negative about this perk. It's got a little bit of anti-synergy where the monster attractiveness kind of neutralizes when you are on these buffs, and his defense isn't good enough to really care about the other piece. But nonetheless, these are not bad buffs, and the fact that this arc gives you a lot of defense as well means that 25% can actually do fairly well to make things work. And if you're going to be running this with another support, like I said you should be, whether it's Theria, Lena, Tink, whatever support you might have, most of them happen to be female, so you probably will have some sort of a defense buff on you or attack buff or something, which is fantastic. Gen is doing debuffing, your ally is going to be buffing you, which means you're going to be getting that additional effect, which is cool. And then whenever any other female units are alive, which hopefully they will be, you get some passive MP regen, which is nice in general. This is also a really good arc on the last build, of course, helping with some Glass Record usage as well as just that passive MP regeneration. And then you get a plus to your healing magic as well. So even though we're not focusing on healing magic, it just makes it that much better, even though we've invested literally nothing into helping our heals. The only investment we have at all is that we can crit with Apocalypse Staff, if you're even using it, and if you're not, it doesn't matter. But your Glass Record will actually be healing people, which is really cool. And like I said, if you want, you could simply swap out 8 points somewhere, drop off one of these 9-point things to just throw God Heal on him too. And you could just have that, so in a pinch, he can God Heal stuff. Cool. I don't need it because I have somebody dedicated to God Healing that works really well. But for you, hey, maybe it might be good. So, different options for getting this cast speed to be better. Like I said, you can have somebody use recast on him. That gets rid of 30, so you could potentially drop off the Cultist Pendant for something else. You could swap this arc off to be something else. So you could keep Cultist Pendant and Radstone, and then get rid of this arc, meaning that you don't have that 30%. You could run the Light of Science arc. That'll give you 20% cast speed, getting you to 90, which is still pretty good. I do think it's worthwhile to hit 100, though, so that's maybe not the best bet. But if you decided to run Light of the Science, you could then get rid of Radstone instead, and then use Recast. So between the combination of all those things, you're still hitting 100. What I think is probably the best secondary choice is something like the Ancient Book. I've talked about it in some other cases as well, but the Ancient Book will cut your magic costs in half. So if you're spamming Glass Record, then it's only going to cost you 30 instead of 60 at the cost of some of your life. But as soon as it resolves, it's going to heal off that damage you just took anyway. So you could have Recast going on to him instead of this 30%, have it cost less, which means when you use your 3, maybe 4 Glass Record, you use less MP, which means you have less MP to recover, which means Drink of Cola might just do most of it for you. You might not even need to stop to Goddess Kiss very much. So if you are finding yourself, again, chewing through MP too quickly and not regenerating it, you have options. You could swap out Sharp Eyes for Phase Change. You could potentially put on more MP up so that your passive Drink of Cola gives you a little bit more. You could potentially run Ancient Book as your arc so that you're using less mana overall when you're spamming this stuff. So you have lots of choice, which is really great in order to make this work, because everybody's accounts are different. Everybody has different accessibility to certain arcs and skills. You've seen now a super support again for people that need that, as well as super Omega DPS Gen, so Swiss Army Gen, and the DPS GENerator. You should be able to, seeing that combination of things, find where on that scale your account needs Gen to be and where he can evolve over time. Okay, so I think I'm going to take this in for a really quick showcase of how this playstyle works with what I feel is his optimal line of damage. I'm not going to bring a friend unit. I'm going to have Rem, who is clearly going to be my main damage dealer. She's going to be doing majority of my damage, but you'll see Gen's damage is quite substantial as well. And this type of thing works out pretty well overall. We start things off. We're going to fatigue to make him weaker. Okay, so he's got that debuff. We're going to do another one here. Debuff, glass record. Okay, so that's just happening. Now, if before that finished we got interrupted, the effect would still go off because we are an instacast, and you don't need to finish the whole 1 second animation for it to work. So if we got knocked up, we could land, go directly into another one, and that effect still happens, and that's for all support magic. So we are doing a couple of glass records here. You can see there's about a second delay between those effects happening. So now he's got some of these things coming in. We can see our crits are hitting cap pretty easily. We're going to do a shallow words in order to get some more regeneration, and you can see that buffs on all of our units now. Rem is just going to be doing her thing. I'm not even going to bother controlling her. The AI is going to be using her skills for the most part, just by nature of this being here. So we only have one damage dealer here, but with the secondary damage from Gen, this is still quite sizable. So I'm going to go ahead and run off screen here, and we're just going to continue laying in for some damage. So you can see our non-crits hitting for about 4 or 5k. Not too bad. This is going to jump up even more once we can get our ult online. So I'm going to start autoing just to see Goddess Kiss. So you can see 138 there for our regen. And we're back up to being pretty significant. Now that we're out of skills, we're just going to start spamming glass record again. Okay, we're going to do another shallow words. We don't want skills on cooldown, so we're going to go ahead and use one of those. We're going to reapply some debuffs to him. You can see he's already down to a quarter health, which this opening part of the fight isn't nearly as hard as others. In general, I apologize for the lag spikes. There's definitely some... my phone is not performing super well. I don't have an iPhone. I hear this performs much better on an iPhone, and I've since moved away from them. But now, just taking a look, these guys are usually relatively beefy. This first wave of them isn't too bad, but I'm going to go ahead and show how significant some of the damage can be. Looks like we actually got hit, so Theria is going to go ahead and revive Gen. So Gen is going to go ahead and run his ass way over here, so that hopefully he can stop dying so much. So we're going to use shallow words first, because it's on a delay. Start using some of these skills. So you can see our crits now hitting him for sometimes 6,000 and 7,000, or non-crits rather. I'm going to go ahead and spam a little bit more of these glass records here. And we're going to shallow words, and we're going to start laying in with some more damage. Okay, so some of these enemies just spawned up. We're going to go ahead and voice impersonation, try to hit all these guys. So this AoE damage, let's see what we're looking like. Fairly decent damage, not too significant, but these guys are obviously significantly beefier, but we should be able to flip their... if we can manage to flip their defenses, we should be looking really, really good. Because the problem is these guys all have buffs on them elevating how strong they are, and it looks like now we have defense decreased them. So now we should be hitting quite a bit harder. Yeah, with our skills doing roughly 20% of their health each time. Again, this frame rate gets crazy when we have this incredibly many numbers on screen. While Rem is doing things, this is definitely mostly Gen taking care of them. This AoE damage is pretty immense. If I come in and manually control her so that I can do don't get in my way, she'll chew through them as well. Wow, okay. Frame rate's extra bad. Alright, so then went and sniped that one there, and go ahead and reapply some debuffs, and now we're really, really low. So let's see how quickly we can actually get back up just by doing our Goddess Kisses. We'll shallow words as well, just to make sure we're getting some more MP up for our Rem. I think reject is actually probably suitable. So you can see we just jumped back up over 200, so that's pretty sizable. Again, use some more skills. We just got another 161. Now this fight, if I was using an actual friend partner, would be a joke. If I had maybe a Bayland or another Ray, it wouldn't even pose a threat. So you saw there, I started my animation, and then I got slapped. I still got the glass record to happen, but then I was able to go directly into another one because he flinched me. So he actually helped me with this whole damage loop. And again, if you simply forego Sharp Eyes on him, you have zero mana problems at all. You can see we're back up over 200 again. Relatively simple. Back up over 350. So Goddess Kiss really does enough work here. Let's go ahead and throw on some more debuff magic on the boss. Again, we're just going to keep throwing damage downwind. I'm going to focus on my damage on the boss himself. And then I'm going to use autos on the minions so that I have more chances for Goddess Kiss. Okay, we're going to go ahead and glass record. Spamming that glass record. Again, every second or so getting a tick of that. We're going to shallow words. Now, another thing that you could do if you wanted to shift some points is opting for stock skill 1, because his S1 does do pretty good damage. So getting stock up on that can really help. So if you saw the actual damage on all these guys, that was pretty ridiculous. So voice impersonation, I mean, it's just chunking them. That was what? Easily 30% of their health. And part of that is just because he's debuffing to make them take a bunch of extra damage as well. So then a couple S1s here, and that should be able to finish him off. Cool. So there you go. Basically, one dedicated DPS unit. Him on sub DPS, we were able to get through the Reaper fight with pretty minimal consequences. Okay, if you actually are running with a full team with a friend support, it's going to be even easier than that, which is pretty great. All right, so now on over to one of my favorite topics, Arena. There's some different ways. I think there's 2 definitive ways that you could play Gen in Arena. One, he could just be a sniper, basically. I think the best way to play Gen is to have him be some sub-sniper damage support, but to also just be your main caster. And the reason for that is he's really good at beating people to the first cast, also just staying alive in general. So usually you want to be spending points on things like decoy and illusion and HP ups and to be able to get people to go towards your allies. Well, he comes with most of these things baked in already, which really favors what he's trying to do. In addition, he's got that curse and the silence nil, which is really great. So if they're trying any shenanigans to be able to do that, they need to be running V or a null mouth to be able to shut down your game plan, in which case hopefully you can just focus down wherever those problems lie. Let's go ahead and crack open the build here. First of all, I have him set to using dark magic because I want him to be using dark for this particular arc that we're on, and I really like using dark magic in Arena. Blizzard is probably one of the most common things in Arena, at least right now, and it's because the cast time is relatively quick, hits the entire board, and there's also a knock-up at the end, which means that you become CC'd at the end of the animation, giving the caster enough time to cast another one and just kind of lock you out of the game, unless you get lucky or do something really tricky to be able to interrupt them before it can happen. That doesn't work so well against DB Ray, who's really good because he shrugs off ice magic, so Blizzard doesn't work very well against him. So people will often do something like run Abyssal Silver, which if darkness is lower resistance than ice, it converts your magic over to that. So DB Ray, that happens to be the case since he resists ice. So you could use Blizzard and it turns into dark damage, allowing Ray to flinch. I prefer to just simply use dark damage, and I found that it works pretty reliably well, and I also synergize with it with the rest of my team, but depending on how you want to run things, it might be a little bit different. So just be aware there's different casting options. You could very easily run him on Blizzard if you want. You could also run, well, we'll get into it. So arc choice. Ghost Hime. This, I think, is one of those arcs in Arena that you want to be running if you own it because it's so incredibly beneficial to you winning that fight. One, when taking damage, you have a chance to receive Brave or Critical or Haste. This doesn't really matter. More importantly, chance for Dark Magic to give Curse. So if you are running a build where you're able to reduce some of their ailment resists, you could potentially throw Curse on people. And if a DPS unit of your opponent or even yours gets cursed, it could just spell your victory, or it could spell your defeat for the whole rest of the match. Like, you could just outright lose because you just lose so much of your damage, especially if you weight it all towards 1 or 2 units. Like for me, when I'm on offense, Dante does the most significant amount of my reliable damage. So when he gets cursed, it hurts really bad. So I usually try to find fights where they're not even running this, so I don't have to worry about that quite as much. Now, the secondary effect is potentially even bigger than that. So it doesn't have a chance, it just at battle start gives Spirit Rot to all your opponents. Now, in PvE, Spirit Rot is kind of blah. It basically says reduce all healing by half. In PvE, usually people aren't healing very much. That's just not a thing. But in Arena, God Heal Spam, Awaken, Proud Force, there's so many ways to be gaining health, and it makes it really hard to climb that mountain to just get people over that lip, to completely kill them and make them lose that point in Arena. So making all their heals be half as effective means that they have to use even more MP when they're spamming their God heals. It means that Awaken won't do as much, Proud Force isn't going to do as much. So they're going to be using their resources and not getting as big of a benefit, meaning that you don't need as many attacks for any single enemy to be able to take them out. So I think this is absolutely fantastic on Gen. There's probably some other options you could run as well, but since I want to showcase Sorcerer Gen, I think that it works really, really well on him. So let's go ahead and actually hop into his build, and we see what I am doing unique on him. First of all, Venomous Rainfall. Now, there's an argument to be made that Dark Matter is better. It only costs 5 instead of 8. It, I believe, may have a slightly quicker cast time. I think the animation is about the same, maybe even slightly quicker. So if you just want those base effects, I think that you're totally fine using Dark Matter. I think that it can work really, really well. It also costs 6 less MP to cast. So I think that's a great option, especially if you just don't have the Poison Dragon Arc to be able to hand out Venomous Rainfall. I personally like using Venomous Rainfall because it hits a little bit harder, which, you know, damage doesn't matter much on your caster because it's all about the CC you're providing. But when you are doing some damage, it helps to maybe happen to secure a kill here or there, meaning that Pose for Honor can get you more MP back and just allowing that chain to happen more and more consistently. 2, I'm running Venicleave on my V. So I am banking on me potentially giving poison to people. I said before that people don't accommodate for poison at all because why would you? It's like the most negligible thing in the world. Well, this allows me to give poison. I have V potentially giving out poison, and then as soon as they get poisoned, V is going to be doing 50% more damage to people. So I really, really like how that ends up playing. It's kind of a win more, but I've come back and lost when an opponent only had 1 or 2 points left. Sometimes winning more actually just means that you get to win, and I think this is a tool where I think the trade-off of costing more over Dark Matter is totally worthwhile. You do not want to use something like Abyssgate. The animation is just too long. It's going to take probably 5 times longer for damage to start ticking on an opponent. So you'll keep people locked out of casting things like Blizzard more often, because if you didn't know, these spells that take up the entire board, that counts as like an instance and they can't stack. So if Venomous Rainfall is going, a Blizzard cannot be cast, a Dark Matter cannot be cast. If Blizzard is going, your Venomous Rainfall can't be cast. So you need to be able to interrupt so that a cast is not happening so that yours can happen. So cast speed is super duper important. Okay, so we're going to be adding a little bit of tankiness with HP plus 2. I think on pretty much every unit, like I said, for PvE. It's one of the biggest increases you can have. So that'll help when we're running things like Awaken to make it easier for you to survive when you get to low health. And it'll also just make it much, much harder for them to climb that mountain overall. I'm only running MP up 4. You want to make sure that your MP is up high enough that you're getting a fair chunk whenever that regeneration happens. I believe even that passive amount that you get every, I think, 6 seconds in Arena, I believe that goes off of your max as well. I could be wrong on that, so please correct me if I am incorrect. But regardless, Drink of Cola, as well as we're going to be putting on Fast Magic Circle, because those stack, those will both be benefiting, hopefully, from having our max increase. At the very least, Drink of Cola definitely does. Okay, so Fast Aura, Fast Critical, Fast Magic Circle. This is the place where we want to min-max on our uptime. If you're playing things correctly, things shouldn't be lasting more than 40 seconds probably in an arena match. If it is, you're probably doing some sort of weird strat to like stall people out for, I don't know, casting an ultimate or just timing people out so that you can get like 1 kill and then run timer out by just surviving. It's probably a very niche build and again probably works there, but we want to just be flat out winning, so fast skills work really well here where I don't like using them in PvE. So Fast Aura for the extra damage, Fast Critical for the extra critical rate, Fast Magic Circle for extra mana regeneration because he's going to be a sorcerer. We want him to be using skills or using magic for some CC. Awaken is kind of a staple in Arena. If you don't have it and your opponents do, you're at a severe disadvantage. If you're running a strat that relies on healing, you need the time for that healer to be able to get MP enough to be able to use spells to heal your team. Awaken helps with that. It makes you beefier. It gives you basically a free get out of jail free card to heal you back up to full. And the more HP that you have, such as with our HP up plus, the more benefit you will get from Awaken. So you can stack even more HP ups if you're finding that you're dying too much, but hopefully between Silver Tongue and then I believe we have Reject in here, the AI should be targeting your friends much more than you. So the only way you should take damage is from basically just passive cleave damage when they're attacking your allies and they're just slightly too close to you and you get caught in an AoE. Pose for Glory, Pose for Honor. I mean, these are self-explanatory. They're only 2 points, and if you happen to snag a kill, you can use more skills. If you snag a kill with Pose for Honor, you will just flat out get enough MP for another Venomous Rainfall. It's that good. You'll probably be getting 20, 30 MP, I think, off of that kill, just because percentage-wise, that 5%, when we have it raised enough, is going to be enough. Spirit Breath, this is great on anybody all the time, especially when you're running Get in your party, just because it makes your glass record, instead of reducing all of your cooldowns by 10 seconds, it turns it into 13. And then if you have somebody spamming God Hills, it's extra in addition to that. So the more skills you can spam than your opponent, the more damage you're going to do, the quicker they're going to die, and hopefully the less you're going to be able to die. So Spirit Breath, Pog, put it on everybody. Maglion, same treatment as others. We want to be abusing his modifiers that there are. So he's got his backstab, he's got surprise attack, he's got all that whole backs. He's got the crit kit, he's got the backstab kit. Being ranged away from people is also a big deal. So we want that to be elevated here as well. And like I said before, we want to be raising our cast speed because we want to be able to beat the other caster to casting, and Gen has a disadvantage of not being built in with something that helps us cast speed, so we can just do as good as we can. So high level magic chant will give us the 20. Like I said, reject on here to just emphasize Silver Tongue more so that hopefully enemies never focus Gen. You'll find he's very, very resilient because he just doesn't get looked at. We're opting for skill charge 1 and 2. This is because these are his damage dealing skills, and also we have quick trigger. There's only one stock available on his S2, his Shallow Words. So if Quick Trigger happens to hit Shallow Words, that means that Skill Charge 2 literally accomplished nothing. So that's wasted. And if it doesn't hit Skill 2, the charge doesn't do enough to give us an instant skill usage on it. So we can just watch if Quick Trigger happens to hit your S2, you could use it right away to queue up your team, or you could just have the skill charges on the other two so that you can be using more skills out the gate, and don't worry about the S2. It will get charged as the match goes on, and it's also a bit of a win more because it does lock up your unit for roughly a second while it's casting. So, Sharp Eyes. So, Sharp Eyes, again, just ways to deal more damage, and this is another place where he kind of has an edge on other casters because he can be a sniper while gaining these other things. So he can afford to take something like Sharp Eyes, because if you use Sharp Eyes, say you're at 20 MP, you need 26 for Venomous Rainfall. If an enemy is about to die, you could use Sharp Eyes, maybe drop yourself down to 10 MP because you just powered up your attack, but it was strong enough to take them from 25% health down to dead. Now you get Pose for Honor, and you just refunded all your mana and then some, and now you can go straight into a Venomous Rainfall. So between Drink of Cola and the damage he does to be able to snipe people and snag kills, he can support Sharp Eyes damage while being a competent caster to keep casting up all the time. At least that's how I've experienced it, and we'll show that when I actually showcase a match or two here. That's it for that core build. Alright, so our arena setup for gear is very similar to our DPS generator that existed over in PvE. Main difference being is we are foregoing dual wield, because in arena, unless you're using a specific unit, dual wield has much less value overall. Yes, you still get 20% extra damage, but it costs you 14 points for that 20%. The damage cap doesn't come in very often because it's going to be very rare you ever hit damage cap because of the way damage calculations happen in arena. So I've seen some people do crazy things where they can hit damage cap with REM and they have their max damage screen saying that it's 15,999. Cool. I've never been able to do that, and I don't think that is a common thing people can usually do, and especially a unit like this where you just want to be doing reliable damage, it's not going to happen. So as I said before, Science Flag easily is best in slot, gives him the most amount of damage, and you want to be able to snag kills and deal a lot of damage, which he does with all of his multipliers happening. But like I also said, he will do just fine with any sort of staff with lots of int. So whatever you have that gives him lots of int, it'll work just fine and dandy. Now, Mummy Suit, I really like. This is going to help with Awaken as well as some other things. I told you that HP plus 2 is easily the best on majority of units for beefing up your HP. Mummy Suit comes with it for free. So the fact that it has 999 base HP means that you're just elevating that, and then if you put more HP ups on him, it scales off of that base. So you're also getting extra MP, which means your MP regeneration naturally is going to be higher, and it's pretty great. And then in addition to that, it also has the effect of giving you one for your revive. The only negative to this really is you get the undead type, which means certain people may have a Slayer on you, but that's usually going to be negligible. And you already come with decoy, so you get a free revive. Now, I don't know exactly how all these things stack. Originally, I was under the impression that revives could only happen once, and then those effects just go away. But I went against some people before where they were able to revive 2 or 3 times in a row, and I wasn't quite sure how that was happening. So if anybody has some thorough knowledge on how all of these things stack, it would be very helpful. I know that there is the green pendant that gives you that effect. There is decoy, there's from zero, there's the mummy suit, there is that UR ring to revive, I believe, to full once. So if you had all of those things on your unit, how exactly does that function? Do certain things take priority over others? Can some of them stack multiple times? I would like to know. So this is 2 effects. I haven't tested to see how well that works, but if nothing else, I think the stats work, and the fact that it's closed means that you get your close high boost, so you get a little bit of extra mind to defense as well as extra physical damage as well. So you're kind of elevating your overall damage to make up for the fact that we don't have dual wield. So, and then we are of course running Cultist Pendant and Radstone. This gives us, with the high level magic chant, a 70% cast speed, which isn't too bad. It's overall pretty good considering the Venomous Rainfall is a tier 3 skill, but it doesn't take extra long to cast, so it might take you maybe half second to 1 second to cast, which, as long as we're getting mana faster than the enemy sorcerer, or we simply kill the enemy sorcerer, we should be able to maintain CC well enough to make this work. So let's go ahead and take it into a match or two and kind of talk through using Gen and the sort of options you have. Okay, so taking a look at this, V has the Ghost Hema, meaning that's going to be a little bit tough. Clearly DB Ray is their hard carry. And I can't do criticals to Lagrabos because of his arc, so that's going to be a little bit tough to take down, but you know what, we're going to try and just see how miserably this goes anyway, even though I think this is a suicide attempt. So what's the fun of going in here and being gold 1 if you don't intentionally throw some matches, right? So let's just go see how this works out. Lilibet I found to be very squishy, so while she can kill people really quick, it seems like she tends to just kind of fall apart herself. So she feels very glass cannon in arena, but maybe they'll be able to surprise us. Now, first thing I always do, I check status of everybody. So he is weak to Curse, which is pretty great. Also weak to Curse. So this person is not really compensating for resistances very well. He's just using natural. So since Ray is stacked up with Abandoned Seas, City in the Sea, he's going to have a bunch of abilities, which means he's going to be their main carry. If I can manage to get a Curse on him with I put a spell on you, or V perhaps, it could shut down a lot of their damage. So I'm going to opt for that rather than I could also go with Shallow Words since Quick Trigger hit it, which would be a bit of a risk because it locks him up. It's not doing any damage, but it does pay off. So if I survive, 5 seconds later, my team's going to be queued up for more damage. So I'm going to instead open up with I put a spell on you, switch to V, and I'm going to go with Guillotine to see if I can get a status ailment on him from that. And then Dante did get a curse because of the Hime, which I expected. I'm not built to resist those things, so I expected him to get up there. So instead what we're going to do is we are going to move towards Lagrabos manually with an auto attack so that once he's uncursed, he can start laying into him. We want Lagrabos gone because we want Gen to be able to gain the cast space and gain priority. So he's going to start heading over there. Now that I've hit Ray, who did not get cursed, of course, I'm going to go ahead and Shallow Words to queue that up. Then I am going to, I think, just start doing some blockades for just passive damage because they're a quick animation. Let's see where we're at now. I'm going to go ahead and Shadow combo, and then now that Dante is freed up to attack again, we're going to go ahead and come over to Lagrabos and use his attack. We might be able to catch Lilibet as well, so if she doesn't move, maybe we can hit Lilibet and then just get Lagrabos with the pass-through. And it looks like we did manage to get Lagrabos. So now I want to focus on Ray because he's a significant amount of their damage. So I'm going to go ahead and Macabre and then switch over to Theria for a God Heal. Actually, we're just going to be safe and go with a God Heal right away. Okay. And then we're back on Dante. So then I'm going to go ahead and do our Macabre on Ray because we want him gone. V is also a valid target. Actually, I think it's more important to get V out of here because he can apply ailments and we don't want that to happen either. So I'm going to go ahead and Sting over to him. You can see we're getting blizzarded now. We're taking tons of damage, so this is what I expected to happen, and this death and dismemberment is going to be my downfall. So took a little bit of hits, but I've got some revives happening. I'm going to go ahead and Guillotine on Ray to try to get him gone, which I did get him, but I took a casualty in the process. So with Theria stunned now, there's not a ton that I can do, so I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get Gen to make anything happen. I see the screen darkening, which means I think he cast his Venomous Rainfall. If I can do that, I stand a chance. So I'm going to go ahead and focus Lagrabos so that he can't catch my... Yeah, I did get it, which should be mine. So they're starting to get stunned. I'm going to use some of my skills on Lagrabos to try to actually get him out, if I am able to, now that he's revived. You can see he's taking a lot of hits. Now that this animation is about done, I'm going to queue for another Venomous Rainfall. I need to lock things up enough that Dante can come back in. and start doing some work. And Dante didn't survive again, so that's really unfortunate. So God Heal unfortunately killed my Emtheria because I'm running my risky build and I forgot about it, so lots of mistakes being made here. Guillotine, I think I'm going to do on Legrabos, followed by Gen. All right, so they got us in the cast space again, so we're pretty much done. Legrabos is winning the cast battle. Luck we did take him out, though, and V is a wet noodle when it comes to defense, so I'm going to go ahead and start spamming skills on him. So we're going to do Guillotine, and we're going to do I put a spell on you, and maybe we can get this final kill before they nuke us. Damage, damage, damage. Voice impersonation for the win, and we get it. Barely. So that was really, really tough, but we managed to inch it out by properly balancing focus and being able to take that casting space. There was a little bit of a tug and war back and forth, but we managed to make it work because the damage from Gen is really solid. That 70% cast speed was good enough to get the job done, and Dante was just manhandled that entire match because I was focused more on Gen and V, but overall it worked. All right, let's go ahead and do one more here to see how this turns out. So here we see Ghost Team A again coming in. This one doesn't look like too big of a threat. I feel like I might be kind of picking on this guy, unless maybe they're just doing something really, really weird, but we'll go ahead and do it anyway. Maybe they'll surprise us and be able to snag some early on kills. So God Lily, she doesn't have much for like auto cast unless you have a robe, which is probably why they're using her, and she has very bad defense as well, but what she does have is a super high health pool. I think she's the beefiest health-wise of all casters. So again, we want to be able to focus her. I think what we're going to do though is instead of using Sharp Eyes for skills, we're going to see if we can get some Goddess Kiss procs. So we're going to go ahead and attack, switch over to V, Guillotine, and then we're going to Sting. And Dante should be able to easily take out Lily, like without much problem at all. So she's weak. Just to make sure we secure the kill, we're going to go ahead and Macabre. All right. This is where Dante comes in huge. So we're going to be able to Sting over here onto Bayland, and then we're going to wait for Lily to come up with her decoy, in which case she should be back with like basically no health. So we're just going to do some autos, and then V is going to use some skills here, maybe just throw a blockade. So now we're up to the point where naturally, without us doing much, Gen is already up to where he needs to be. So we're going to go ahead and Venomous Rainfall and start locking them out of the game. So we are very, very weak, but Lily is up, which means we can snipe with Overdrive and just get that insta-kill off of the respawn from Decoy. Now these other people are all quite weak, so I'm just going to do some pass-through on Rem and probably hit Bayland as well with Dante. So everybody's being stunned at this point because they're out of this 10-second pirate ship window. Dante did get taken out, which is pretty unfortunate. We are going to go ahead and use Guillotine, and then we already almost have enough for another Venomous Rainfall. Once this animation finishes, we will definitely have it. So we're just going to go ahead and use some of Gen's skills to be able to hopefully take out Bayland and some of these others while Dante is working on getting back up. He's very, very weak at this point. Bayland Voice Impersonation will hopefully take out Nero as well as Bayland. So there we go. Managed to closely get him, which means I put a spell on you, should be able to finish up. So you can see there, we used that. Sharp Eyes brought us down to 16, and then shot us back up to 35 because we managed to secure the kill, which means we can do another Venomous Rainfall now. All right, so Lily's back up, so I'm going to go ahead and Guillotine, and I'm just going to focus all my resources on making sure that once my Venomous Rainfall is done, she can't beat me to a cast. So she's off the board, nothing else to worry about. I'm going to Macabre. That should be able to take out Rem, I believe. Otherwise, I'll just throw down some autos and some other damage here. Nero, yeah, we'll snipe across the map at him. And then, yeah, we're going to go ahead, and Lily's back up, so since she's easy prey, we're just going to sting onto her and be able to lock up the victory here. Macabre for the win. Cool. All right, so you can see how that comes in. We had another Venomous Rainfall coming in. Gen still had a 60 MP to be able to keep things going, so he was able to fuel Sharp Eyes. He was able to get his casts off. This was a perfect showcase of what he does really, really well, in addition to the rest of the team. All right, well, I think that about wraps it up. We got to see two different builds for Gen for PvE, where if you have him as your only support, he can be totally viable to fill that role, and he can get the job done very, very effectively, while also doing a little bit of extra damage and not be completely useless on the damage side. Otherwise, if you happen to have maybe maybe you're at an end game or veteran player and you have all of the tools unlocked and you really want to min-max his potential, I showed you the Gen DPS GENerator build, and I think that's really where he shines most, and when you've really unlocked his full max potential. And then over in Arena, we've talked about how he can be an adept sorcerer and be able to make that work, and then different ways that you can adapt all three of these different builds to kind of work within what you need in order to balance out more cast time or more passive regen or more active regen, maybe some more auto attack damage, whatever it might be. There's a lot of different tools and options you have for Gen, and I think personally he is an absolute top tier unit for both PvE and PvP. I think he fills a unique niche of DP regeneration that nobody else really does, while also being a debuffer and a competent DPS unit as well. And the fact that his Silver Tongue is basically like a situational charisma that stacks with other charismas is absolutely massive. So rather than those getting canceled out, like if you use Bayland and Roland, you can only have one of those charismas. His stacks in addition to everything else because it's not technically a charisma, even though it just is there for him existing on the board. Yeah, I think he's a very good unit. I think because he has a unique kit, I think it's going to take a while before he gets power crept out, which, you know, if you happen to be watching this breakdown a year from now, maybe that'll be totally changed. Maybe there will be a ton of battery type units in the game, but I don't think that it's going to happen very frequently. It seems like Adis is just making a lot of different unique types of characters, generating more variety rather than just direct power creep. So I think Gen is going to last for a long time. The fact that he is super viable without having a damage cap increase is really promising as well. So overall, I think he is absolutely fantastic, one of my favorite units in the game, and icing on top, it gives me an excuse to use my Apocalypse staff that has been gathering dust for so long, because it just works really well on him. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you coming here and supporting me. And if there's anything else you'd like to see within these unit breakdowns for future ones, I will probably be doing one for Dante, V, Nero, Theria, probably Merity. I want to do some of these. I will only do it for units that I've actually maxed out or have mostly maxed out. If I just need Awaken 6, I don't really care. But otherwise, I will only do these for max. And you'll notice that I did this breakdown in the builds based on 84 CS. I will always do my builds based on whatever people have been given by events. If you didn't get the 4 CS, or the 4 SC, that's on you. I'm sorry, but you didn't grind it out. That's fine. You're going to have 4 less points to work with. But for instance, I have my Dante at 92. I will only make my build at 86 because everybody was able to get him at 86 if you got him, because you were given 3 prisms for free. So just be aware, I'm not going to have builds that are above and beyond whatever we have been given by default. So again, thank you very much for your time. If you learned something, please feel free to let me know in the comments, things that were good, things that could be improved for the future, and then different types of videos that you want to see as well. I tried to make sure that my audio quality was better this time versus my first two, and I ended up jacking up my gain way too high, and then I realized after an hour and a half of recording that I had to scrap everything and then redo everything right now. So hopefully it sounds much more crisp and clear. It should be balanced a little bit more like other videos that you see. And it shouldn't be over-tuned too bad. So please let me know if there can be any improvement there, and if there's other ways that I can make these videos better or more accessible to you, depending on, you know, what skill level you are in the game. So do you see value in these? Would you rather see more generalist videos that maybe aren't focused on a specific unit, but rather roles? I want to do a lot of different things, but whatever's going to affect and help the most people is what I'm looking for. So as per usual, like I said many times already, thank you very much for your time, and go forth and murder things.